Before the Oklahoma City Martin Luther King Coalition, there was no Martin Luther King holiday in Oklahoma. But then some leaders began to rise up and demand change.
That integration is not merely a romantic or aesthetic something where you merely add color to a still predominantly white power structure. Integration must be seen also in political terms where there is shared power and where black men and white men share power together.
I'm gonna get my freedom on this here side. Freedom come and I want to. Everybody freedom, freedom. Hey, freedom come and I want to. Well, I ain't been to heaven, but I think I'm right. Hey, freedom come and I want to. Well, the people in heaven are neither black or white. Hey, freedom come and I want to. Everybody freedom.
Can you say your first and last name?
Roosevelt Milton.
Nathaniel Batchelder.
Angela Munson.
Linda Torre, and my husband's name, my late husband's name is Opio Torre.
How did you start the coalition?
Well, it wasn't just a one-person idea. 1980 is when we started. The problems that we were faced with here in Oklahoma City, we didn't have no Martin Luther King's Day, and we were one of two states that didn't have it. We wanted it, and we felt like that was something we could fight for, and that's what we did. So, you know, I didn't have to be talked into it because I already had an issue with the department, so I was dealing with the department independently. So we decided, well, it's time for us to make some noise. Let's figure out how we want to do it, and let's get in there and stick with it. So they said, well, you want to take on this first one? I said, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And so we did that at the Capitol, and we had 35 people, and we were happy with that, because we wasn't very active at that time in terms of putting ourselves in a position to get run over by the state or the federal government for something we did wrong. We felt like we got pretty good at what we were doing. Felt like, oh, this first one was pretty good. We could do this some more. And we'll keep doing it. And then we figured out how to expand it. Let's expand it by going to the Historical Society. A lot of this stuff here that I'm telling you now came after, say, 2010.
Tell me about the start of the coalition.
Well, we met at Roosevelt's office in the city-county health department meeting room. R.L. Doyle, Wayne Thompson, Roosevelt Milton. There were probably 6 or 8 of us at the time, and we met every month, particularly towards the end of the year, getting ready for the January Martin Luther King events. And it was just natural for me to be there. I felt right and committed to the same issues that they were talking about, and glad to help.
Our first event was a spring event when we planted a tree in honor of Dr. King on the Capitol grounds. And it was cold. It may have been a January birthday event when we planted the tree, but it was really, really cold outside. That I do remember. And there were probably 12 or so of us, a dozen or so, gathered around this tree, and it was like singing a song. Kepler Nurakim was singing, probably booming out "Old Freedom" or something, and somebody spoke, and we were trying to get that tree in the ground so we could get back inside where it was warm. But that tree we planted was a way to symbolize for future generations and those who ever came to the Capitol grounds the life and the contributions of Dr. King. Well, it didn't take very long after that tree was planted for others to recognize what we were doing, and that tree was vandalized and then vandalized and vandalized again. And every time it was vandalized, we came back and we planted and we sang. And it seems like every time we came back, that crowd got larger and larger and bigger.
They were doing good work in the community. I mean, he saw people, honestly, who were sincerely, from the heart, trying to do what is best for our community. And if you know anything about Opio, if you're sincere, if it's not about who gets the credit, who gets the attention for the work that's being done, and the people with the Martin Luther King Coalition, again, they had an objective, they had a goal in mind.
At the beginning, what was the goal of the coalition? Like, what was the specific goal?
Well, those 7 organizations got together, and we wanted to work toward making Dr. King's birthday a holiday. That was the whole purpose. We didn't know what it was going to lead into. We definitely didn't know that it was going to eventually lead into Obama becoming president. But it did lead into that, and that was what we was working for. We never did stop because we knew if we stopped doing it, they would, we probably would have trouble with the city and whoever else had any power that wanted to stop us from doing what we were doing. So we met at the Capitol for about 5 years. Like I said, we did have some detractors. The detractors were standing at the door of where they worked, and they was giving us the blues about, why are you marching? What are you marching now for? So that's what it was all about at that time.
All of us who were involved were radical enough to hope that we could parlay or use that to create this movement of young people and older people to really make a difference in our community, to galvanize folk around a person who we all recognize as being a hero, the civil rights change agent. And if we could continue to articulate his message and draw attention to his mission, his goal, his life's journey, then maybe we could continue to raise up generations of people who would share that dream and continue in the fight and the struggle. Although not spoken as a mission or a goal, I have no doubt, because I know the individuals involved, we all believed in our hearts and our minds that, some real revolutionary change was necessary, and bringing together folk around the life of Dr. King was just a means to do that.
And that if it was going to happen, they were going to have to make it happen by talking to the governor, the legislators, to make it happen. And they were going to have to get the people involved to make it happen. So I think they had a common interest, and that goal was achieved because of all the work that they did. And I should never call names, but when you have the NAACP that's very active, and then other organizations and that you get involved, things can happen when people work together for the good of everyone.
To gain visibility for Dr. King and his many words and writings and books and speeches, and I think from the start, it was successful. It's a tradition. Now it's become a tradition. And another generation is taken over, which I'm happy about. But I think our goals have been met, and racism is not over. But I think our goal has been to help make progress towards ending racism. And we have done that.
Wayne Thompson, a group of us who were watching what was happening around the nation, who understood the importance of the contributions of Dr. Martin Luther King and how important it was for us not to ever forget and to make sure we taught generations that were coming after us to do something. So we got together and said we should figure out ways to memorialize the life of Dr. Martin Luther King.
What do you love about the coalition?
You know, probably a whole lot of things. I love the fact that we still not just talk about the life of Dr. King, but we try to exhibit what that means.
Well, I like places where I feel a sense of belonging, a sense of welcoming, a sense of purpose. And I think every time we got together to talk about the possibilities for the coming Martin Luther King Day, I felt all of those things. All those people I mentioned and others have been friends because of the coalition.
I think he would be very pleased that the work is still being done. I do. That the coalition is still together, that people are still working, because there's still a lot of work to be done.
Could you tell us about Mr. RL's contributions to the coalition?
Well, his contributions were many. RL was always somebody who had a decent job, so he had little money that he could spare. And he spared it with the branch frequently, all the way until now. And he didn't start, though, being the chairman until after I became president of the NAACP. That was 1987. We needed for him to step up into one of these positions, and he did. Paul Thompson, I know you're going to ask me about him, but I was going to say Paul was dedicated, but Paul would put those signs. We had 20 signs on Lincoln and then 20 on Martin Luther King, what became Martin Luther King. So Paul would make sure that we had them up during Black History Week, Black History Month, he would make sure those signs be up, then he would get with the city and they would take them down. And they would store them for us. So Paul had a good role, and he worked hard and made sure that happened.
Paul Thompson was always for justice and peace and diversity and equality for every human being, every child of God. He asked me one day, he said, "Do you think that coalition would support a gay man?" I said, "Come with me to the meeting. I think they will." And he joined. He was in deep, up to his neck, forever. And so I'm proud to be part of honoring him today.
June the 12th of this year, I would have been married for 30 years. And the lady who had the good sense, I had the good sense to marry, is here, my wife, Linda. Linda, please stand.
I would just add that Opio was a fierce champion for justice. And I do mean justice for all. And one of his favorite quotes, and I'm reading it from his journal, "I am only one person, but I am one. I can only do so much, but I can do something. What I can do, I ought to do. By the grace of God, I will do." That's the life he lived.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
As we are honoring these heroes, we ought to be thankful for the sacrifices that they have made for our freedom.
And that we get to learn this history and share it for generations and generations to come.
So let's keep the legacy of the coalition alive.
We set the foundation.
We set the foundation.
We set the foundation.
We set the foundation.
For justice,
Peace.
Love in this world.
Because
we are all
We are all
We are all
we are all
the coalition.